This is King's Field. Its masterful game design paved the way for the FromSoftware we all know today, and if you enjoy Dark Souls, it's a game you should know about to better understand the foundation of Souls. King's Field was FromSoftware's first video game series. Their first game ever, titled King's Field, was the Japanese PlayStation's first RPG. Their second game, also titled King's Field, but technically King's Field 2 in Japan, was the International PlayStation's first RPG. It also happens to be one of my favorite games of all time. And the reason why FromSoftware is one of my favorite companies of all time. This is just a cool camera trick that I saw my coworker Kurt do that I wanted to replicate. Don't mind me though. While FromSoftware is notorious today for Hidetaka Miyazaki's genius and the Souls series and beyond, what I find fascinating is that so much can be traced back to the very conception of FromSoftware, way back before Hidetaka Miyazaki ever worked for the company. Now, let me know if any of these design concepts sound familiar to you. You start in a location with branching paths. There are definitely routes you shouldn't take and are far too difficult for you, but the game won't hold your hand and trust the player to discover for themselves the correct path to go. Meanwhile, it's actually okay to travel these paths if you can accept the challenge. There is a story, but it's not completely spoon-fed to you, and you'll have to look at item descriptions to get a fuller picture of what's going on. There are locations with hidden traps that have been set for you, which you can also utilize against your enemies. The game is notoriously challenging and forces you to figure out the mechanics yourself. There are a plentiful amount of hidden walls and trust falls onto hidden ledges with both secret items and weapons for you to find. In other words, secrets that are actually meaningful and exciting to get. Your weapon attacks are slow and methodical, meaning you feel the weight of your weapons. You have a stamina gauge and can't just repeatedly attack without some sort of negative repercussion. The world design is interconnected, and you'll find looping and branching paths as well as shortcuts that bring you back to earlier points in the game. While I've been showing footage of the Soulsborne games, all of these elements are right here in this little gem. So, let me rewind and give you the exact same speech, but with King's Field footage. You start in a location with branching paths. There are definitely routes you shouldn't take and are far too difficult for you, but the game won't hold your hand and trust the player to discover for themselves the correct path to go. Meanwhile, it's actually okay to travel these paths if you can accept the challenge. There is a story, but it's not completely spoon-fed to you, and you'll have to look at item descriptions to get a fuller picture of what's going on. There are locations with hidden traps that have been set for you, which you can also utilize against your enemies. The game is notoriously challenging and forces you to figure out the mechanics yourself. There are a plentiful amount of hidden walls and trust falls onto hidden ledges with both secret items and weapons for you to find. In other words, secrets that are actually meaningful and exciting to get. Your weapon attacks are slow and methodical, meaning you feel the weight of your weapons. You have a stamina gauge and can't just repeatedly attack without some sort of negative repercussion. The world design is interconnected, and you'll find looping and branching paths as well as shortcuts that bring you back to earlier points in the game. Now, while I can tell you this and show you this, it's better if Hidetaka Miyazaki shows you himself. This is just a random paper I decided to use as a prop. King's Field was the beginning of the Demon Souls project. I wouldn't go as far as to say that we had King's Field in mind while we were making Demon Souls, but of course, I think its world probably formed one of the bases for the newer game. However, if you're asking if it's a successor, the answer is no. Of course, there are parts of the game that are inspired by King's Field, but we were very much aware that we wanted to make a new title with Demon Souls. Let's toss aside the Souls series though, because I really want to focus in on what makes King's Field so special to me. In my opinion, King's Field is a masterclass in good game design. While it's an RPG, you'll never need to grind in order to be able to progress. And while some people might like grinding, and there's nothing wrong with that, I do think it shows a proper awareness of balance. Similarly, while it's an RPG, as it has action elements, that means you can still overcome a level deficiency with skill. Another pointer I want to harp on is that its secrets are incredibly meaningful. When I say King's Field has interesting secrets, I mean that you'll literally find yourself mashing X as you rub up against the wall, hoping to find a secret door or hidden chamber. There are chambers similar to Sen's Fortress with trapped walls, hidden doors, chests that contain skeletons instead of or on top of loot, doors that drop enemies behind you, pendulum maces, and more that you can take a risk and choose to try to explore, despite the scary fact that you run a high risk of dying to any one of these traps. Meanwhile, there are chambers you can drop into with hidden items that are dead ends, and unless you discover a mechanic for warping out, which is never explained to you, that's it. You're literally trapped with the question of, how do I get this thing? Similarly, there are trust falls you'll encounter that lead to secret areas or items. Oh, and you can die from fall damage, so when I say trust fall, I mean it. And while all of this makes exploration fun to do, there's an important factor to it. The majority of the time, if you take one of these risks, you'll be rewarded with an interesting item, and I truly mean something you'll probably want to use, whether it be a weapon, a cool spell, a key, or some type of special use item. I tend to overuse this example, but in many of the Zelda games, your reward for exploration is a box of rupees. And while that's fine, a lot of times you won't really need or want it. However, in King's Field, I've never found myself annoyed at the reward I received for exploration, and while you're not always rewarded, you usually are, and it makes it that much more meaningful. On top of that, some of the secrets are fucking cool. In one instance, I found a painting that said locked, but couldn't find the key. So I attacked the painting, which killed the painting and ended up being the way to unlock this particular secret. In another instance, a merchant was blocking my way to an expensive item. Rather than buying it from him, I pushed him out of the way by constantly stabbing him, stole it, and then found it was no longer for sale. The game actually took into account this random mechanic of being able to slowly push NPCs by attacking them. You'll find standard puzzles where you shoot fireballs and light lamps, or perhaps minecarts you'll have to jump off of in the middle of your ride to find another hidden secret. Then, there's the map design. The labyrinths of my personal favorite Kingsfield games, Kingsfield 1 in the US and Kingsfield 4 The Ancient City, are genuinely interesting, with plenty of unique areas you'll find. You'll also often find yourself exploring deeper into an area that feels genuinely intimidating and oftentimes will take you out of your comfort zone, but in a good, challenging kind of way. On top of that, they often wrap within themselves, with surprising shortcuts and secrets you'll unlock that show just how smartly interconnected the map design is. Then there's the music. Unlike many of the modern FromSoft games, Kingsfield has consistent music playing throughout the game, which is atmospheric and spooky. These tracks add to the mood and creep factor of games that, honestly, graphically, don't hold up that great outside of PS2's The Ancient City. In fact, I often use these tracks in the background of my Souls lore videos as ambiance, since they suit the mood of those games just as well. Then, there's the Moonlight Greatsword. Many of you will know this from Demon Souls, or perhaps Dark Souls, or perhaps the Bloodborne DLC. But the Moonlight Greatsword first appeared in the Japanese King's Field and has become somewhat of a mascot for FromSoftware. In fact, it's even made an appearance in Armored Core. And I bring this up because a lot of the DNA of FromSoftware goes all the way back to King's Field. It was a niche game made for a niche audience, just like Demon Souls, but like the Souls games, it tackles that niche with a degree of excellence. Now look, maybe I have some rose-tinted glasses on and I'm overly nostalgic about the game, but every time I go back to replay my favorite King's Field games, I fall in love all over again. And that's not true of every game. And the thing is, I am so glad FromSoftware has finally been discovered, so to speak, because it's not just King's Field. Inspired by King's Field, FromSoftware also made the Shadow Tower games, which share a similar design philosophy to King's Field, only even more challenging as your weapons now break. On top of that, they created the Armored Core franchise, which has, for the longest time, been one of the best mech series out there. Now, not every game by FromSoftware has been a masterpiece, and admittedly, I haven't played all of them. Eternal Ring was okay. Ninja Blade, I hear, is anything but good. However, in my humble opinion, FromSoftware deserved to be on the map before Dark Souls blew them up. And I'm glad. I'm glad so many people finally understand how incredible this company is and how amazing the games they develop are. I'm glad they're able to continue to make amazing games, and so excited that they still maintain an uncompromising vision to their games. Hidetaka Miyazaki has taken the spirit of King's Field and brought it into Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. Although, I still want a new King's Field. Thanks so much for watching me ramble about a game that means so much to me. Graphically speaking, I know it can be rough for many, but I truly think the core design of these games are impeccable, and I just want more people to know about it. Anyways, this is part of a series of FromSoftware videos we're making in preparation for Elden Ring, so make sure to come back for more from us at GameSpot and from myself.